But over the course of 11, 12 years of doing this show, as you can imagine, there's just every kind of call for either what I called stunt singing. Like I did an episode of the Cleveland show, which had Sofia Vergara on, and they wrote it. I had to write a tune for her to sing, and she really did her best. But the producers decided that it really didn't. Sally, can you find me somebody who can sound like Sofia Vergara? And she found someone, and then actually Sally did one on I think the Cleveland show also because what did you who did you start singing?
It was the Bear song.
Yeah.
The one that the lady that speaks with an accent. The political lady that's the very liberal. Is it? No.
Oh yeah, Ariana Huffington, who has a small role, continuing role on the Cleveland show. That's right. She tried to sing something that didn't work out as well, and Sally came in and actually sounded exactly as if she were singing. So.
Because we share political beliefs. That's right.
Anyway, so there are things like that, and then sometimes there'll be a piece of source music in the film, and they wanted to buy the actual recording, but find out it's too expensive, and then we need to find somebody who sounds like Bon Jovi or something. And I don't know anyone, other than people who are this seasoned who could come in and do something like that, as I'm sure you know. So
let's kind of on this question of the actual sessions itself and dealing with all of these kinds of eventualities that happen and challenges. What would you say are kind of best practices, both from the point of view of writing, knowing what these singers are going to have to do, and then coming to the sessions itself? I mean, let me put this to Merv first of all. I mean, as a consummate vocal writer, there's a lot of considerations that, for example, a young composer may not have thought of. Who's used to writing instrumental music, and are they taking into account, for example, range and breaths? So can you speak a little bit about, how do you approach it from the actual writing point of view, first off, before we can get into the studio?
From the point of view of writing?
Yeah. Just tips for the composers out there that maybe haven't done any vocal writing before,
right? But
hopefully as a result of our speaking today will say, okay, I think I'm going to gain some confidence from this and have a stab at it.
Sure. That's an interesting question, because I've been sort of singing all my life, and I think I sing as I compose. I play the piano, but I sing at the same time, even if there aren't to be vocals in that piece. But when there are, I certainly just sort of instinctively think about breaths and that sort of thing. So for someone who has not written for voices before, certainly breath is a very important thing. As a matter of fact, it's kind of similar. They tell you to breathe when you're conducting. To sort of breathe as you conduct, because breath is just sort of an inherent and important thing, even for instrumentalists. I'm actually struggling a bit to answer the question perfectly, because it's sort of instinctive.
I think for you it's
me.
instinctive, exactly.
So I'm not sure. I've never sort of quantified what do I do when I'm writing a vocal arrangement, because it's always come naturally. But I'm happy to think through it if you can ask me something more specific.
In terms of maybe readability, all of those kinds of things that we might easily get wrong as composers, and just say, I'm just going to write it out and not give it the right considerations. I
had to do an arrangement a couple of weeks ago for the LA Gay Men's Chorus. And I had previously arranged that song. I had done an SATB arrangement, and this was a TTB arrangement. So I called the conductor and I emailed and said, I need to know the range of your voices. What are your tenors capable of in a full voice, not falsetto? What are your second basses capable of? What are my parameters? And he gave me those things, and then I worked in those parameters. You certainly don't want to get into a session, and this wasn't a recording session, but bringing it back to our discussion, you don't want to get to a recording session and realize that something in the wrong key, and they're reading, and it's charts, and it's, you've got to redo things. So do as much research as you can, know the voices for which you'll be writing, and know, what they're capable of doing. Range, obviously important, breadth is important. The techniques for writing for voices are very different than writing for instruments. If one really wants to be serious about that, I would imagine, there might be some materials out there that would give one tips on doing that. But range would be very important, just to make sure you're not writing outside of the range of the voices that you're going to have.
This is great.
May I add
Yes, of
something
course.
For the last 5 or 6 years, I've taken a group of singers down to USC to the film composers. Yeah, there you are. It's been a wonderful day of workout for the singers, because each composer, there's usually about 20 composers, and they have like 13 minutes on the stand, and they have to rehearse and record the cue. And for the last few years, I've gone down ahead of time to talk to the classes, because what a lot of the kids run into, you wouldn't be tempted to do this on a job where you have an assignment, but a lot of the kids want to make up a language, or they want to write a string of 7, 8, 9, 8, 15, 7, what, I don't know. So we just talked about what would help them write a chart that they could come away with a really good performance of. And you lay out the logical soprano range and the alto range and the tenors and the basses, and I've suggested that they don't make up languages, and the clarity of the chart is so important, because if you hand somebody something that's really too small to read easily, or if you pass out parts where the sopranos only see the soprano part, the altos only see the altos, and so on, it slows things down, because you're working with a room full of people that are technically good musicians, can read and can look at a chord and know whether they should be sticking out or not, So those simple basic things are really do affect the performance that you get.
Great.
I would say try and sing some of the parts yourself. Voice leading is very important. I mean, if you have odd leaps that don't need to be there, look at a Bach chorale. There's a reason why. So, so I think trying to sing it yourself would help you realize some pitfalls.
Yeah. That's good.
Conducting is also important. Conducting an orchestra, there's a way that you conduct an orchestra, and there's usually, an orchestra it's a runaway train, and the orchestra is usually playing slightly behind the conductor, depending on the style of music. Maybe not so much on a faster rhythmic piece, but there's a bit of a different sort of physical vocabulary between the conductor and the. But singers are accustomed to a bit more precise conducting, and I've done some sessions where an orchestral conductor who's very capable with an orchestra is now conducting voices, and it's very clear to us as singers that he's not familiar with conducting voices, and that can slow us down as well. Although the singers in LA are very, we know what to do and kind of fix it, amongst ourselves. But that can slow things down, because where's the beat? He's beating differently than. Yeah,
tight breath. Yeah.
Right.
Well, this is good. It takes us into the recording process itself. So we've done our writing, we've done our prep, we know our ranges, we mark up as many dynamics as possible so that it's all there. We show the other voices on our score to the vocalists so they can work off that. Now we're in the session itself, and how does it differ with working with just other musicians? Are there specific things that are very helpful when you're working with the singers?
Just as prepared as I could possibly be. I go over it. I try and, I only expect the singers or the musicians to add to what's there. I don't expect them to come up with anything. I don't expect them to really invent anything. It's here, which automatically gives you a base to start from, and the people who I'm lucky enough to work with will only make it better.
Right.
But nothing disappoints and frustrates people than being unprepared, working with somebody who doesn't, you know.
And when you've got a director there, or who's also involving, we were talking about before, is how they might approach it, that these are actors, and do you find yourself stepping in or being a buffer?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty lucky. I haven't had that occasion present itself too many times. But yeah, you have to. You can't let everything go flying out the window because there are too many opinions or things like that.
Right.
You know.
If the contractor, unless it's a solo duo, or unless it's a woman who's been asked to hire a men's choir, or a man who's been asked to hire a ladies group or a trio, the contractor must be a performing member of that group. That's where the musicians union differs, I think. So you want somebody that can function as a singer, first of all, but also that someone that really knows the contract, knows the community of singers, and can guide you through the session so that you don't end up at the end of that 3-hour, 4-hour session with a bill that wasn't at all what you expected. And you want to know that the people that person is hiring are all members in good standing of whatever union or whatever contract jurisdiction that comes under. You know, maybe at the end of this evening, too, you might ask the people who are contractors and on the singer committee to stand so that the people can kind of get talk with them afterwards or somebody like that. There are many really excellent contractors in town.
Let's do it now, so while we're on the subject.
Just
any vocal contractors in the
Bobby
audience?
and Randy and John and Christy and Angie and Beth. Edie, hi. And I urge you. I don't know how to say this and have it be politically correct, but anybody can function as a contractor, and you fulfilled your obligation by, if you have 6 singers or 12 singers or whatever, one of those people is the contractor and is responsible for filling out the paperwork. But you want to be sure that that person has a little experience and knows what they're doing and will give you the accurate information. If you have friends that are singers and you want them to work and you enjoy and you respect what they do vocally, then ask for them. I want this person with us and whatever you put together. You know, but I wouldn't necessarily start there with the contractor.
So the vocal contractors, I've been learning about it in the process of putting this together, and so they really fulfill the role of a vocal orchestrator, arranger. In
most cases, I think when I stop and think about most of the contractors in town, I know I worked as a vocalist for 20 years before I didn't want a contract because I was afraid the other contractors wouldn't hire me if I did that. So the people that are a little more seasoned are the ones that kind of usually grow into that. They float to the top, and that's how it has evolved.
And they conduct as well?
Yes, many of them do, many of us.
So, they have a very much more of an involvement in the creative side of things than, for example, an orchestral contractor whose business it is just to find the right musicians and make sure they show up.
They don't have to be a musician.
They don't have to be a musician. So it's something very different, and I think for me it was a qualitative difference that I found important to kind of understand and realize that we want to do all the prep that we can and get everything right from the writing point of view, from the session point of view, but at the same time knowing your own limitations and saying, I need help for this, not just to find the right people, but to do the right arrangements, for them to look at my parts and say, this is not going to work, and this is how you can do it better. And, you need to put out the syllables differently. You need to gain these kinds of dynamics a little bit differently. So, yeah, it was a shift of understanding of the role of the vocal contractor. So I think that's a really important point to understand. And I think talk to the people that you've seen here stand up, and make friends with them, make contacts, get their details, and so for the future projects that come up, you'll know who to call, you know who to go to. That said, you can also go straight to Terry and Stephanie, and I think on the some of the information that's in here, there are phone numbers, there's information specific to the different kinds of contracts, who you're going to call, and they will help you through this kind of process. So in the sense, while we're all a little bit disparate, we're not on our own, and we've got this incredible pool of amazing help that can make sure we do a really good job, get hired again.
I was just reminded, as you and Sally were speaking, of something that I've seen Sally and some of the other contractors do that's fantastic. When I'm on a session as a vocalist, and say maybe it's a big vocal session for choral session for maybe a movie score, and there might be 60 singers or something. That's a big group. And Sally, but then the composer will have different cues where maybe he needs the sopranos to split 3 ways. Mm-hmm. Sally has already worked out. If the sopranos split 3 ways, it's going to be you, and you, and you. You know, she's got that all worked out so that this isn't a surprise, and you have to sit there and kind of think, okay, what do we do? Mm-hmm. That's all worked out. You know. Also, the contractor is just sort of in constant communication with the conductor. Maybe something is unclear on the chart. Mm. So in between takes, she might say, do you want this here or is this? And then, we're hearing it. We're hearing that conversation. But, she's always sort of looking ahead and figuring out things like that, which is, so there is definitely a hands-on approach. Right. It's not just filling out some paperwork and passing it in. Right. There's a really sort of wonderful, ongoing, organic thing that good contractors also do, and it's. I think it saves a lot of time, and it helps the singers avoid confusion, especially in a huge group like that. It's a massive thing. It keeps everything running smoothly, and we always sort of know what's next. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the next question is, I think it's something that was very much on the minds of composers when we did the event with the AFM, Musicians Union, which is how best should I deal with my clients, my production companies, my producers, and their concerns of financial obligations on hiring union singers. It's something that we face a lot. Very, very much we're dealing with package deals, and we're just given, this is your budget, and you want to work here, ideally, because you're going to save a lot of time instead of having to fly around. But often that conversation is very difficult, and it's difficult because there's a lot of misconceptions about what back-end payments are and what is the extent of commitment on a particular project. So, and I think it's also difficult because we as composers don't necessarily have the vocabulary or the knowledge to be able to argue why this is important. So, can you help us a little bit figure that out? I mean, it's a difficult question in a sense, and I know that we all wrestle with this a lot. If we want to go union when we can, and how do we convince our producers and our clients that it's not going to ruin them financially, that it's worth doing because of the kinds of situations that you've said. You're going to spend more money trying to, overdub it and fix it all than if you just get in and do it. So what are the kinds of arguments that we can make? I mean, maybe Terry, would you like to start with this one?
Sure. And let me preface this by saying, other than TV, because there's very different formulas in place depending on what the initial market is. But if you're working in a theatrical motion picture, I think Sally mentioned this earlier, it's a percentage, the residuals, the producer only pays a percentage of their gross receipts. And they send that to the union, and there are very complicated methods for figuring out what each individual gets. But it's not something that, that the producer is going to have to really deal with. It doesn't add to his financial obligations at all on the back end. Something that we've been hearing a lot recently about is the interactive agreement, which is video games, and there are no residuals or back-end payments at all. You get your session fee, which is significantly higher, and we hate to use the term buyout in union connotation, but that's what it does. I mean, that's it. That's the end of the obligation, and there's really no reason for producers to think that they have to have any inferior talent whatsoever because it's going to cost them so much more later on. You know, that said, television is definitely a different story. But by the same token, whether you're using, you know, music that's already been recorded or whether you bring in live singers, the down the road costs are going to be the same, because once you put whether it's reused into it, those people are going to, you know, have the residuals, or if you have new people, then those are going to have the residuals, but it's always going to be the same amount of money.